This book is titled Juan and the Chupacabras, and it goes something like this. Grandfather, whom you see here, told us about the chupacabras as we ate roasted corn. Some people believe the chupacabra is just a big bird with sharp fangs that drinks the blood of farm animals. They say the chupacabra steals children from their homes. I myself once stood face to face with this hideous creature when I was not much older than you two. Wow, you really got to see the chupacabras, says my cousin Luz. I wonder if the chupacabras are real myself. I had to wonder if Grandpa's stories were real. Oh yes, declared Abuelo, he's real all right. I looked at chupacabras right in its eyes. It happened in the cornfield next to our house. Grandma had sent me out to get some corn to roast, and I was being very careful to pick only the good corn. So careful, in fact, that I lost track of time. Suddenly, I realized that if I didn't finish up quickly, I would lose what little light I still had left to guide me home. And that's when I noticed some peculiar lights that were flashing in the sky above the cornfield. And here you see Grandpa as a boy, noticing the blinking, peculiar lights that were up in the sky. They seemed to be going round and round as if they were swirling. It seemed to me as if the lights were doing some sort of dance in the sky they went round and round and jumped side to side. A beam of light suddenly shut down from the peculiar lights, and a single figure on top of a small hill began to take shape just a few feet away from me. And that's when I saw it, declared Grandpa, rising to his feet and pointing an apparition that only he could apparently see. It was El Chupacabras. It was huge, he says. I could tell by the way the foul beast was licking its lips with its lizard-like tongue that it was hungry for my blood. That's a scary-looking chupacabras. The beast had dark green skin and glowing red eyes that were the size of 2 baseballs. It had bat-like wings hanging from its spine, and the end of its wings were long, bony fingers ending in claws. I would have been doomed that day, said Grandpa, had it not been for my lightning-like reflexes and my sharp, always thinking mind. I reached for a broken tree branch and used it to poke the chupacabras right in its left eye. As the beast hollered in pain, I began to run home. I ran and I ran and I didn't stop till I reached the safety of my home. When I turned to look back, El Chupacabras was gone. My cousin Luz and I both loved to listen to Grandpa tell his stories of his many adventures fighting all kinds of monsters. He had beaten all kinds of monsters, goblins. He had even defeated the greatest cucuy of them all. He had beaten La Llorona, the weeping woman, the ghost woman that walked the earth with a tormented soul for having drowned her own children. I was just a child when it happened, he says, but I remember it like it was only yesterday, he told us one evening. I woke up and saw her standing next to my crib, next to my cunita. She wanted to steal me away, to take me away from my mama, but I wasn't about to let that happen. Nobody was going to take me away from my mommy. I grabbed my baby bottle and squirted her with warm milk right between the eyes. That taught that Llorona to never ever mess with Grandpa Ventura. Is the chupacabras really real? Asked Luz, still doubtful of Abuelo's story. It sure is, says Abuelo. In fact, the chupacabra still lives in the same cornfields. He must be pretty mad because you know what? He never got a chance to get even with me for poking him in his eyes. But with that revelation that a chupacabra still lived in those same cornfields, well, an idea began to form in our minds. Do you really want to go to the cornfields? Asked Luz. Why not? She said. You know, we really should go. Don't you want to know if Abuelo's story is true? But what if it's real? I asked her. What if the chupacabras is really out there? What are we going to do? Ay, Juan, don't be such a big chicken, said Luz. If the chupacabras is out there, I will be ready for him. How? She held up a slingshot and a bag full of marbles. A slingshot and a bag full of marbles? This is your great weapon against the chupacabras? These aren't ordinary marbles, declared Luz. These are marbles that I soaked for an entire hour in holy water at the church. I dropped the marbles as I was going in, and I took them out once we were leaving. Does it help? It sure does, declares Luz, as she pulled out a bag filled with even more marbles. How do you think I was able to win all of these? Now, all the marbles in that bag had at one time belonged to Little Robert. Little Robert was the best marble player in the whole neighborhood. Nobody could beat him. It was even said one time, now, Juan didn't witness it, but he heard from a friend, that Juan stood at one end of the room with a marble in his hand, and there was another marble way at the other end of the room, and he shot it all the way across and hit the other marble dead center. Little Robert was that good. But yet Luz, a girl, had beaten him for all of his marbles. She had even taken his most prized possession, El Canicón, a marble that was this big. You had to trade 4 regular marbles for 1 canicón. Though it seemed holy water was her secret weapon. Though they stayed at Grandpa's house, and once Grandpa was asleep, they snuck out of the house and made their way down the dark dirt road that would carry them to the cornfields. Now, they had been to the cornfields a bunch of times, but never at night. At night, the cornfields became a very scary place. They could hear owls flapping their wings in the tree. A coyote was howling in the distance. "What's that?" asked Luz, pointing at a slowly advancing shadowy figure in the distance. And here you see them making their way to the cornfields. "I can't see what it is," I replied, beginning to tremble. "It's a chupacabra," said Luz. "That's what that shadowy figure is." And as the figure drew closer and closer, walking on 2 hind legs, they got ready. Luz reached for her slingshot and her bag full of marbles, and she used not just any marble. She used El Canicón, that great, big, huge marble. She sent it flying, swoosh. The marble soared across the cornfields till it twisting and turning in flight in the direction of the shadowy figure. It disappeared, just swallowed by the night's shadows, and then we waited and waited till we heard, "Ay!" It was a hideous wail. The marble had hit the chupacabras right in its forehead. And Luz, it seemed, had done what Grandpa had been unable to do. She had killed the chupacabras, as we saw the chupacabras fall down to the ground. But then the chupacabras got back up. "Juan, Luz, get over here right now," cried out the chupacabras as it got back up, demanding that we surrender ourselves to it. The sudden unexpected voice of the chupacabras shocked both of us. Grandpa never said the chupacabras could talk. The chupacabras was still alive. It knew our names. It probably knew where we lived. The marble had had no effect on the beast. What's more, we were scared. We began to run. Luz was running so fast that I was running right behind her. Luz tripped on a tree trunk and fell face down to the ground. I was falling too close and tripped right over Luz. We were now helpless at the mercy of the chupacabras, who was getting closer and closer. We could hear the heavy beast breathing heavier and heavier as it was drawing nearer and nearer. "Juan, Luz, stay right where you are," the chupacabras. "Don't you move an inch." "No," I cried up, and I picked up a broken tree branch on the ground. I jumped in front of Luz, and I stood between her and the chupacabras, keeping it away. "I warned you, stay away or I will poke you in your eyes just like my grandfather did." "What on earth are you two doing out here?" asked a suddenly familiar voice. "Aren't you supposed to be asleep?" Luz and I stared at each other in amazement. I looked up, half hoping to see the chupacabras, because then at least the death would have been quick. But no, standing on top of the hill was my dad. And he did not look happy that he had to come looking for us in the middle of the night. And he looked even less happy about the fact that he now had a big purple bruise growing out of his forehead. "What in the world are you two kids doing out here? You should be asleep in your beds." "We wanted to find the chupacabras," said Luz. Dad dad's face filled with disbelief as we trembled in fear of our punishment. But then he burst out laughing. Dad couldn't stop laughing. He laughed so hard that his stomach began to hurt and tears were coming out of his eyes. The chupacabras, he questioned loudly. You were waiting for the chupacabras. Whatever gave you that idea? He wanted to be like Abuelo. This is where he said he fought the monster. Dad smiled and said that we needed to get home. It's way too cold for you all to be in the cornfields this late at night. As we returned home, Luz asked him, why did the chupacabras not appear? And then Dad added, Grandpa forgot to tell you one part of the story that he told me. El chupacabras only comes out when the moon is full. I guess Abuelo forgot to tell you all about that. Dad sent us to our warm beds and much needed rest. I guess Mr. Chupacabras will have to wait until we have a full moon. But if we do that, wouldn't he be even scarier in all that moonlight? And that's the story of Juan and the Chupacabras. Dun dun.